Today we are going to be going through how I made this Shadowheart cosplay from Baldur's Gate 3. If you're unfamiliar with either or, you're also welcome to tag along. Baldur's Gate 3 was Game of the Year a couple years ago, so I feel like everyone's pretty familiar with it. It was ridiculously good. It's based off D&D. Amazing. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have not played it, you should probably play it as soon as possible. Shadowheart was one of my favorite characters from it. She is a cleric, which is a class I never ever play, but I still adore her. She was definitely up there with who I wanted to romance. She was a character I love so much. She had such a wonderful story and development, and she was hot. Which, when it comes to cosplay, to be quite honest, it's a major decider of whether or not I'm gonna make a cosplay. So I decided I wanted to cosplay her, inevitably. Problem was, I'd never foam crafted a day in my life before. But I'd been waiting for the right project because throughout the years I have really wanted to pick up more foam crafting, but it's always seemed very inconvenient, impractical, not within my skill set. I guess there was a lot of self-doubt there. I'd always thought to myself, well, you can sew, but you're not one of those foam crafting people. My cats are crashing into the door. When you see the cosplay compilations at conventions on YouTube, it's the foam craft stuff that's like huge, right? Like, I grew up watching like a lot of Kamui cosplay content and stuff, and it's been like, so it seemed like I worked it up towards myself for so long where I was like, it's like up here and my skill sets are like down here. This was a mountain to climb of cosplay for me, is a best way to put it. But I actually fell in love with doing it, and I didn't think it was as hard as I had cracked it up to be over time. Thank goodness the sun just came out. I was like, the lighting in here is kind of like icky, but it's like better now. I made an itinerary of everything I plan to go through this video. I am filming a little less prepared than I'd planned to be because daylight savings, or whatever it's called, just happened, and we lost an hour of sunlight, and I want to film before the sun goes down because I just don't like the way that my artificial lighting looks. Okay, so where do we start? And I was pretty lucky because there actually happened to be a foam pattern. I keep getting hair in my lip gloss, so it's like really bothering. There was a pattern on Etsy that I found by a creator that was amazing, and it gave you all the printable files for the paper pieces of the foam armor. And it also gave you a Pepakura file, and I'm going to be using this tool more in the future. It's free as far as I have seemed to see. Pepakura is basically like a 3D paper modeling tool, if that makes sense. So you can visualize how the foam craft is going to sit when it's done. And I had loosely, I tend to overestimate my size. I don't know why. I just always think I'm like a much larger person than I am. So when I saw that there was like an extra 5 inches than like the actual width of my torso, I was like, yeah, that'll definitely fit. Like, I have to account for like anything extra coming up. The armor was too large on me. So just a disclaimer, I would definitely change like the Pepakura file. If possible. I'm like a US woman's small, so like for me it was a little too large, but I think if you're a medium or large it might fit you better, or if you have a bust. It was really cool to see it in 3D and then also match the paper pattern piece. This is where this piece goes and that is where that piece goes, and it was really easy to work with. Thank goodness. It took a lot of time to cut the foam because I didn't quite understand how sharp a blade has to be to cut foam with. So like a knockoff X-Acto knife, I wanted it in pink. It's an Excel knife, but it takes the same blades as an X-Acto knife, and this is what I use to cut the foam. There's still foam shreds all over it. It turns out you do want to change the blade quite often. I did not realize how sharp that blade has to be, but if it's really sharp, you get a really clean cut. And then I glued pieces together with contact cement, I believe. Rubber cement is what I use to maintain flexibility. And then on some of the pieces, not all of them, that I didn't do so well on, I would use my little heat tool that heats more than a blow dryer and looks like this. I use that to also mold any shapes. The armor pieces were like really complicated, but once I got them, I got them. It was really funny because you could tell. So the front piece was the first one I did, and then the back piece, and then the 2 shoulder pauldrons. And the pauldrons look significantly better than everything else on the armor, because there's this point when I was working where my head was just like, oh, this is how foam craft works. Cool, awesome, amazing. And previous to that, I was just pretty confused, and it's really visible. But like I said, we all have to learn something at some point, and you have to face it inevitably. Otherwise, you're never gonna learn it. For the wrist guards, I covered them up in this brown Ottertex vinyl. I don't suggest using one that thick. There are like cry cut type like HTV vinyls that are supposedly a lot better that I saw on TikTok doing the exact same thing with wrist guards, like covering them in a material after I'd already made mine. But the fabric I used to cover it with was way too thick, but I think the idea was there. I would just use a much thinner one of covering it in the same fabric as like the leather armor, so it looks very uniform, and I think it helped with like the cohesion of the whole piece. And I liked the way it looked. It just wasn't very comfortable, and it wasn't very easy. It could have been a lot easier. I'm not trying to crap on my own work here too much. What I'm trying to do is self-reflect, so then nobody makes the same mistakes I make. If you are using this as like a tutorial, then hopefully advice helps, rather than just say, yeah, everything was so good and perfect, and then you're like, this sucks to work with. So I'm just trying to be like as honest as possible. I don't think my work was awful. This was my first foam project, so I learned a ton, and I'm just passing on and transferring that knowledge. For painting the armor, I learned from a random YouTube channel that I no longer remember to heat treat your foam before painting it. I don't know how accurate that is, but I did it, and I hope it helped. I spray painted all the foam pieces in black plastic. I like the black too because it adds like more depth underneath rather than white or something where it just doesn't look as good on top, because it added like these little like, dark crevices in between like the silver paint that I later added. Once the plasti dip was down, I took actually a little muslin scrap of fabric and I put silver paint on it. And then, once again, I forgot where I learned this technique. It was ages ago, because remember, I was making this cosplay from January to August, but it was chaotic. Anyways, so to paint it, I dabbed on the silver paint. Forgot where I learned that technique from, but that's what I did, is I took the cloth, I dabbed it on, and then I layered that over and over and over, and it actually created this cool little, like, grainy effect, which is why I did that, as opposed to, like, a paintbrush clean effect. And I was really happy with that result, because on like a little piece of foam, I tested just like a plain paintbrush, and I liked the result of the piece of fabric so much more than the result of the paintbrush. And once it was painted, the way that I actually attached it, this was confusing. I didn't do this until the end of the project. It was really, really, really confusing for me, at least at first. But I took strips of, because the leather armor underneath was this brown Ottertex vinyl. So I took strips of the brown vinyl and I cut them up and I sewed snaps onto the end, and I super glued the other end of these strips to the armor so I could snap in and out of it. And I was really happy I did that because it was super easy to take on and off. There's a bunch of different recommendations for what you can do, like buckles or like, what else do I see? Buttons, elastic. There were so many recommendations that I saw online of ways that you could apply the armor. Something I tried and failed at was Velcro. I thought the Velcro was awful when I tried that. I would not do that on foam again. But super gluing the vinyl and with the snaps on the end worked great, because you couldn't really see it there, and it blended in with the rest of the cosplay, right? And it was so easy to take on and off really quick. As far as the wrist guards went, I actually made those lace up, which was kind of rough with how I applied that vinyl on top once again, but those went on and off super easy too. Okay, so I want to ramble more, but I'm gonna stay on track with my itinerary. Guys, I'm a yapper, always have been, always will be. Let's get into the sewing portion of things. Where do I even start with this? So let's start with the chainmail. Chainmail. So, oh no, the light is going away very fast. So as far as the chainmail goes, I bought this fabric on Etsy that was this silver knit fabric, which I thought in concept was amazing, but it was the type of fabric where if I didn't serge it like a millisecond after cutting it, it would undo itself so fast. I think I would experiment a little bit more with fabric. The problem is the edges of the foam, like, you know how her armor points out at the ends and stuff? That would catch on the knit and tug it and like yoink parts of it. So there's certain parts of the knit that look very clearly damaged, and there's nothing I can really do about that. It's just frustrating. But the fabric was really, really cool to work with nonetheless, and I'm like pretty happy I got the opportunity to try it. I just basically made I used an oversized men's shirt pattern, which I'm thinking I probably should have used something close to my size because there was some bunching and things. I lined it also with a black lining fabric, and I finished the edges in brown bias tape. She does have a purple collar at the top, and to basically make that, I just laid it out on my dress form with some muslin and then just made a custom pattern for that and sewed that to the top, so it looked like a layering effect, but it wasn't. All the edges were also finished off with brown bias tape because it didn't really show anywhere in reference photos, and I just love bias tape. I can't explain it, guys. It's like if there's like such thing as like a sewing kink, mine is bias tape. I'm just obsessed with bias tape. I put it over so many things that I make. Like at the end of every project I have this moment of like, where could I apply bias tape? So I finished off the ends of the sleeves and like the neck and little other parts in bias tape basically, which turned out great. Kept it nice and clean because that fabric just wanted to end itself. That's what the entire project, this fabric was just trying to end itself. And then next up was the leather armor, which was actually the same brown Ottertex vinyl. I did the same thing basically where I laid it out on... No, I started with a pattern. It was this bodice pattern basically that was like a historical Renaissance-y looking one, and I modified it to high hell and I made it look like Shadowhearts, and it attached on the two sides, and I got these little buckles from Joann's, and there was 3 buckles on each side, here, here, and here, and I would close it up that way, and there's also buckles on the top of the sleeves, so it was like basically a front and back piece that would buckle together on all ends, except the bottom obviously, but it would buckle together on the tops and the sides. And I finished off both front and back pieces in brown bias tape because why not? I'm obsessed with the stuff. Actually, for this it made a lot of sense because the vinyl was so thick that I couldn't properly hem it necessarily, but it still needed a finishing. Like, I'm not just gonna leave it unfinished. I'm losing sunlight so fast. So as for the boot covers, oh my gosh, this was so cowboy. I don't know how else to explain it. It was wild. This was towards the end of the project. I really started to rush things because the con was quickly approaching and I had procrastinated. Okay, so I took paper and I put on the boots and I wrapped it around my legs. And from that, and I wrapped it around and taped it around in the pattern that I would want it to look like, these boot covers. And I quite literally just threw on a seam allowance and cut out the fabric, and that was it. So that's like, that was the entirety of the boot covers. I did that for the vinyl layer. There was like a base vinyl layer, and then with the blue suede fabric, I added that on top. And then it's actually, they attach in the back with the Velcro that I didn't like. So I didn't want to use to put the armor on the outfit. So I just used that for the back of the boot covers to save materials and such, and they actually turned out really well. I was really happy with them. They stayed on the whole day, they stayed up the whole day. Oh, I forgot to mention that part. I put a ton of interfacing in them because part of my problem with boots and boot covers is they always slide down gradually. No matter how large my fencing athlete calves are, they just slip down. It's magic, really, honestly. Things can't go over my calves, but somehow they can go down off my calves. So I put a lot of interfacing in them to keep them nice and stiff, and that really, really, really helped. All right, next up, I will talk about how I made the base, which it goes under the chainmail piece, basically, and over the pants. Was such a pain in the butt to make because suede is so thick, and I got quilt batting, like really heavy quilt batting, and my machine is not a heavy duty machine. The poor thing, I could smell it. Like, I could smell the plastic and the metal turning. I felt so bad for my machine. But I made it and it looked good, and I forgot how I made it. I think I just draped muslin on my dress form and cut it and made a pattern that way. Like, super crazy cowboy way of doing it, but it worked. That's it for the skirt pretty much though. To quilt it, I layered a layer of suede, the quilt batting layer, and then another layer of suede, and I made suede bias tape to finish the edges in, so then I could get a clean edge that matched, and I was pretty happy with it. It was like an air mattress. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had one of those like Walmart blue air mattresses, but it very much gave that vibe, and I was down with it. That's it as far as sewing goes. I'm really trying to not ramble here too much. And then for 3D printing, it also feels weird to take 9 months of work and just put it into like a 15-minute video. I can't quite explain it, but it's very strange. Then 3D printing was a massive part of this. My 3D printer struggled, or my skill set struggled. One of the two was the problem, or both. I have like a really budget 3D printer, and I did get it to print, but it took some effort to get them to look okay. My printer. Hey guys, this is Callie. My footage actually seems to be corrupted when I am playing this back right now. So I wanted to let you guys know I finished the printing process by covering it in Plastidip and then also doing the same silver painting technique that you saw earlier. But that's pretty much it, besides just the wig. I can make further videos in the future. I'll link everything below, such as the 3D printing models and stuff that I used. If you have any questions, you can always DM and reach out. I'm super grateful for you guys as always. I'm so sorry that the video is ending this way. Uh, my heart broke when I went to go look at my footage and it was all missing. But I hope you guys have a great next week or two. My videos will be a little slower because of the holiday season and working on holiday related things. But I hope you guys have a lovely November. See ya! Thanks for watching.